Can you read the letters on that board over there?
EFP, TOZ, LPED, PECFD, FEL, EDF, CZP.
Imagine being a kid in the mid-1980s, when movies weren't just entertainment, but full-blown personality traits. Your childhood was basically shaped by whatever VHS tapes your parents bought, because the cover art looked safe enough. That's the world D.A.R.Y.L arrived in, a movie that doesn't scream for attention like a Schwarzenegger sequel, or melt your face off with laser effects, but instead quietly asked, what if the most advanced artificial intelligence on Earth just wanted to be a kid? Also, what if he actually embarrassed grown adults at arcade cabinets? Released in 1985, D.A.R.Y.L sits perfectly in that strange Reagan-era intersection of optimism and paranoia, where technology was exciting, terrifying, and always somehow connected to the military. It's the kind of movie that feels like it was written by someone who loved computers, but didn't fully trust them, which, given today's world, is still extremely valid.
Data, analyzing, robot, youth, life form. D.A.R.Y.L's an experiment in artificial intelligence.
The film opens like a classic lost child mystery, with a young boy wandering through the woods, clean, calm, and weirdly articulate for someone who supposedly has no memory. This is immediately suspicious in an 80s movie, because any child who isn't covered in dirt or screaming is clearly not normal. D.A.R.Y.L is taken into foster care where he's quickly revealed to be the most impressive child anyone has ever encountered. He learns instantly, follows rules without question, and performs tasks with unsettling precision. He's polite to a fault, he doesn't throw tantrums, and he doesn't talk back. He's basically what would happen if a parenting advice book came to life and started doing your taxes. And yet, somehow, he's also incredibly endearing. What really sells the illusion early on is how normal the movie lets things feel. There's no immediate sci-fi spectacle. Instead, we watch D.A.R.Y.L integrate into suburban life, going to school, making friends, and casually outperforming everyone around him. But all kidding aside though, he would have been my first choice to play on my team in baseball. One of the film's most memorable sequences has him dominating an arcade game of pole position, racking up a score so absurd it might as well have come with the government warning label. It's a movie that perfectly captures the fantasy every kid had in the 80s, that dream of being so good at video games that even adults would have to acknowledge you as a higher life form.
You swear you never played this before?
I don't think so.
Right. But for all you know, you could have invented pole position.
Of course, the other shoe drops and the movie reveals that D.A.R.Y.L isn't human at all, but a military experiment. His name stands for Data Analyzing Robot Youth Life Form, designed to learn, adapt, and surpass human capabilities. This is where D.A.R.Y.L becomes aggressively 80s in its worldview. The government didn't just invent artificial intelligence, but gave its emotions curiosity, and then immediately panicked when it started developing independence. It's the cinematic equivalent of building a nuclear reactor, teaching it how to love, and then yelling whoops when it asks questions. Behind the scenes, the film went through multiple tonal adjustments. Early cuts reportedly leaned darker, emphasizing the ethical horror of creating a sentient being and then deciding whether to destroy it. Test audiences didn't love that idea because, again, this was the 80s and people came to family movies to feel things, not confront existential dread. The final version leans much harder into warmth, humor, and sentimentality, which ultimately helps the film endure. It doesn't want to traumatize you, it wants you to care. At the center of all this is Barret Oliver, who had already become an icon to kids everywhere thanks to the never-ending story. Coming off that film, Oliver had the kind of face that casting directors loved: earnest, thoughtful, and naturally sympathetic. He plays D.A.R.Y.L with a quiet restraint that makes the character feel less like a gimmick and more like a genuinely curious being trying to understand the world. What's fascinating is how D.A.R.Y.L feels like it should have been the launching pad for a long career, and yet it wasn't. Oliver didn't flame out in scandal or get trapped in embarrassing sitcoms. He simply stepped away, after being in Cocoon, of course. He eventually reinvented himself as a photographer specializing in antique photographic processes, which is arguably the most interesting post-child actor pivot imaginable. While Hollywood kept chasing the next kid star, Barret Oliver went and became a literal historian of lost art forms. The adult cast adds an extra layer of charm, especially Michael McKean as D.A.R.Y.L's foster father. Seeing McKean this young is like discovering a beta version of someone you've known your entire life. He brings a grounded warmth to the role, playing a man who genuinely wants to do the right thing, even when the situation stops making sense. There's something inherently funny about knowing where his career would go later. Better Call Saul, The Simpsons, Coneheads, and watching him here earnestly reacting to a robot child who can outthink NASA. It's like watching history quietly stretch its legs. One of the most underrated aspects of D.A.R.Y.L is how likable the kids are. This movie understands childhood friendships in a way a lot of films don't. The kids don't question him too much. They accept him because he's kind, capable, and fun to be around. There's no forced cynicism or eye-rolling sarcasm. These kids feel real and are the kind of friends you'd have riding bikes with until the streetlights came on. The movie knows that kids don't need a 10-minute explanation to accept something strange. They just need proof that you're cool.
Hooky?
Amateur hooker. She dates every night. I just invented the name. It really pisses her off.
What's a hooker?
Technologically, the film is fascinating in hindsight. The idea of an AI that can process information faster than humans, adapt socially, and learn through experience was science fiction in 1985. But D.A.R.Y.L treats this concept with a strange sincerity, never mocking its own premise. The flight simulator sequence in particular was designed to feel plausibly terrifying, with the idea the machine could outperform trained pilots not through aggression, but through calm efficiency. It's the kind of scene that hits differently now that we live in a world where technology routinely outpaces human expectations. Emotionally, the film saves its strongest moments for the back half, when D.A.R.Y.L begins to understand that his existence is conditional. He wasn't born but built, and worse, he can be unbuilt. The film's willingness to sit in that sadness even briefly gives it a weight that elevates it beyond simple family entertainment. It asks whether love can override design, whether experience can create a soul, and whether something artificial can be deserving of compassion. For a movie that also includes kids playing baseball and arcade montages, that's a surprisingly heavy lift, and it mostly pulls it off.
A child with a stick of chewing gum has just rendered your $100 million worth of hardware useless. Any suggestions?
In the end, D.A.R.Y.L didn't become a franchise, launch sequels, and didn't dominate pop culture the way other 80s classics did. Instead, it quietly embedded itself into the memories of a specific generation. The kids who saw it on cable, rented it from video stores, or stumbled onto it in a lazy afternoon and were caught off guard by how much it made them feel. It's a movie that doesn't shout its legacy, it just earns it through sincerity. What really solidifies this as an underrated 80s gem, at least to me, is how confidently uncool it is. It doesn't try to outdo its contemporaries with bigger explosions or louder villains. The movie isn't afraid to slow down or let moments breathe, or to sit with emotion instead of racing to the next set piece. D.A.R.Y.L feels like the kid who wasn't the loudest in the room, but turned out to be the most thoughtful, and that kind of confidence ages well. There's also something deeply comforting about the film's worldview. It believes families can be formed and not just inherited. It also believes kindness matters and that curiosity isn't something to fear, even when it comes wrapped in circuitry and government funding. Watching it now, especially in a world where technology feels increasingly cold and impersonal, D.A.R.Y.L almost feels radical in its optimism. It suggests that intelligence without empathy is incomplete, and that learning how to care is just as important as learning how to calculate. That's a surprisingly hopeful message for a movie that opens with a child wandering alone in the woods like a rejected science project. I also think D.A.R.Y.L suffers from being too quiet for its own good. It doesn't have the instant name recognition of E.T., Back to the Future, or the merchandising machine of the Goonies. It lives in that middle space remembered fondly by those who saw it, but rarely brought up in best of the decade conversations. And that's a shame, because it absolutely deserves to be part of that dialogue. It's not just a curiosity or a nostalgic footnote. It's a well-crafted, emotionally grounded story that understands childhood better than a lot of louder, more celebrated films. Rewatching it as an adult also reveals how much trust the filmmakers had in their audience, especially kids. D.A.R.Y.L doesn't talk down to you. It doesn't over-explain its themes or wink at its own emotions. It just assumes you'll understand the sadness, fear, and longing without spelling everything out. That's rare now, and it was even rare then. The movie treats its young viewers like people capable of empathy and thought, which might be why it sticks with those who saw it at the right age. So yes, D.A.R.Y.L is absolutely an underrated 80s gem, and more people should see it, not out of obligation, but because it genuinely has something to offer. It's a movie that reminds you why you fell in love with films in the first place. Sometimes movies aren't perfect, but they make you feel something real. It quietly proved that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that don't shout, they just stay with you. Buried beneath the wires, circuits, and government paranoia is a simple, timeless idea that being human isn't about how you're made, but what you learn to care about.
Always remember this. You are a real person. You are real.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make